First up, though, let's talk about things that are happening, well, some close to home, some further afield in Ukraine and China with James Sunderland, a former Army colonel and also Conservative MP. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. I just want to ask you really briefly, actually, just about those changes in terms of sentencing powers and things like that, judges and police chiefs getting more powers. A lot of people are saying, yeah, this should have been the case already. Why was this not already the case? And why have we got a Tory government that, after 13 years, is bringing in these powers?
Well, I think that it's the right thing to do now. Bringing people back into the courtroom for sentencing is both part of the sentencing and the reconciliation process. It's also part of that justice that we need to impose upon those who are found guilty of crimes. So I can't comment on why it hasn't been done before. It is difficult, of course, legally to drag anybody anywhere, but the Prime Minister's undertaken to do it, and we're going to do it. So that's the right thing.
Well, let's talk about where we are with Ukraine. You and I have spoken many times about that. We've seen incredible amount of big drone attacks on Russia, 6 different regions targeted. Russian officials have said this will not go unpunished. How is the Ukrainian counter-offensive going?
Well, again, the MOD is much better sighted than I am. I don't have access to anything apart from open source. But what is quite clear to what I'm seeing is that the Ukrainians have now got an air arsenal, drones and fast air, and they're launching attacks against Moscow and other parts of Russia. And quite clearly, it's indicative of the fact that the nature of conflict is shifting. And it's shifting because the Ukrainians now are clearly fed up with the Russians attacking them on their soil. We still have Russian forces on Ukrainian soil, and the Ukrainians are fighting back. And I think what they're doing is 2 things. They are clearly prosecuting military targets that may have an effect upon the war itself within Russia, but they're also trying to change public opinion. And what they're doing is they're bringing the conflict now into the living rooms of those who live inside Russia.
And that was thought to be very important, but there haven't been in terms of changing the minds of especially the rich and the influential in Moscow and St. Petersburg. But there's also a big concern that from many we know in NATO, particularly in Europe, that this kind of escalates the war. I've been of the view for a very long time, since word go, we should just be open about that. Yeah, this is a battle between Russia and the West, training up these pilots in our own weaponry, it doesn't really pass muster. We're leaving Ukrainian people to die. We're going to end up having to go in anyway. We should have done that a long time ago. But there is a concern that actually we don't have the forces to do that. If Britain was under attack right now, we'd have run out of ammunition about sometime last March, would we not? Do you think that this is escalating things, though, the more and more drone attacks we're seeing in terms of taking this war outside of Ukrainian territory?
Julia, it is an escalation, no question at all. I mean, last year you had a situation where Russian forces invaded a sovereign neighbour. It was pretty illegal. It was pretty obvious. It was pretty brutal. The Ukrainians evoked worldwide sympathy in amassing their forces to repel the invader. The narrative was pretty straightforward. Now, of course, you've got a situation where the Russians are being defeated on Ukrainian territory. Their invasion has failed. Their forces have not turned up. Putin is again trying to seek yet more people to join a conscript army. And I would hazard a guess that militarily and strategically, the Ukrainians are now pressing home an advantage. But what they are doing quite clearly is now attacking Moscow in both retaliation, their original attack, but also because they are escalating the conflict in order to win it. And I think militarily, there's a strong argument in favour of that. OK, well,
let me bring you breaking news in the last minute while you were speaking. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has confirmed his resignation from that post after just over 4 years. He said that the Ministry of Defence is back on the path to being once again world class. He says the United Kingdom is respected around the world. He says whether the last 4 years has seen our armed forces and their leadership shine through, whether it was the evacuation of Kabul, our COVID response, Ukraine or Sudan, the professionalism of our people has been first class. He says, as I finish my tenure, I can reflect that the Ministry of Defence that I leave is now more modern, better funded and more confident than the organisation I took over in 2019. Is Ben Wallace a big loss to the Cabinet?
I know Ben Wallace very well. He's a good operator. He's been very good for that department. He is tired. 4 years is a long time in that job.
It's a very intense job, isn't it?
Very, very intense job. he mentioned a while ago that he spent, at least 4 years with 3 phones by the side of his bed. He's had no life. And we need to show him all of the accolades of somebody who's done a very, very good job. And I'll certainly miss him. But the important thing is that we've got many candidates lying in the wings. And I'm confident that the Prime Minister, whose decision it is, will make the right decision, and that we'll get somebody coming in who is equally competent.
Well, runners and riders for that job. Grant Shapps, the Energy Security Secretary, is thought to be the front runner. We've also got James Heapy, one of his junior, not Secretary of State, but Defence Minister in the department. Also a possible figure from John Glenn from the Treasury. It's very unusually, a former Defence Secretary, Liam Fox, as his name has entered the frame, but some suspect that may be because the person who drew up the list for the shortlist in number 10 used to work for Liam Fox. Do you think he's a genuine contender?
Julia, all of the names you mentioned are completely credible, and there is an argument perhaps that the person who does that job needs to have some military knowledge. In the past, that hasn't always been proven to be the case. And we've had people who are non-military doing a very good job. But all of the names are credible. I know all of them. They're all good people, good ministers. And I would hope that when Rishi does his reshuffle, perhaps imminently, that he will have a mix of experience in there and also inexperience. In other words, new MPs, 2019 intake, people who can do the job. Parliament is blessed with
I'm wondering whether you're hoping for a job in there. That would be interesting. It is interesting though when you look back. I mean, Ben Wallace is by far and away, if you poll Conservative Party members, the most popular cabinet minister, way above anybody else, and has been for a long time. Many people question why he didn't run for the leadership. He's always said it was family reasons. He wanted the NATO Secretary General job. That was basically torpedoed by Joe Biden over some disagreements, I think, over Ukraine. But what's interesting is when you talk about what the armed forces have done, we talk about failing Britain, broken Britain. We talk about public services just on their knees, failures in education, massive failures in the NHS, certainly the Home Office, abject failings across the board. You can't get a driving licence. People worry about getting passports. The most basic things that aren't done. And again and again and again, whether it's dealing with an international crisis or a national crisis, we turn to the armed forces, the crucial role they played in doing things like setting up Nightingale hospitals in COVID, and providing supplies when we had energy problems. Really brutal role crucial role they played. The airlift, the evacuation of Kabul, massive criticism of the Home Office, the Foreign Office, never of the MOD. The MOD was regarded, they were the people who actually delivered. And again with Ukraine, again the training up of armed forces in Ukraine and the supply of goods and weapons to them. There's no doubt at all that we are seeing that one of our few first-class services now in this country is defence.
Julia, you're right. I mean, you raised so much in that. I had the benefit for 27 years of serving the MOD as a senior army officer. And since becoming a politician in 2019, I've been part of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, so I've travelled. And the first thing I'd say to you is the fact that having travelled a lot over the last 30 years, I can tell you that the UK is a great place to live. It's a great country. Countries are broken across the world. The UK is not one of them. And we do ourselves down at our peril. The UK is a great history. We're a great country. And I'm afraid it's political scaremongering that says how bad we are. No, we're not. We've got to put things right as a government. We know that. We've had the pandemic and other macro factors, but this is still a great country, and we have a lot to be proud of. Okay. In terms of the MOD, it is an excellent department. It's well run. And the reason why it's so good is because you've got good people in there. You've got a mix of military and civilian personnel running that department. You've got senior Army, Navy and RAF officers and senior civil servants who are all sympathetic to the cause. It's not a department I would regard as woke, yes, because they're very output focused. And they're output focused with good people. And if you ask the MOD to do something, the chances are they'll do it. Yeah. If you look at the way in which over the last few years, other government departments have relied again upon the MOD, it's indicative of the fact that the MOD is a good department. And I have to say, the person replacing Ben Wallace is going to be very lucky indeed by having a good department under their wing.
James Sunderland, appreciate you joining us. Tory MP James Sunderland, former military man himself.